Good evening, everyone. We're so glad that all of you gathered here again to join us. Delighted to have all of you with us again this evening for our fourth and final presentation on dreams and spiritual formation. The naughty children will have to go to the back of the class. Reconciliation is right there. Yes. Right. Either that or it will be required for you to share your most recent dream, Dave.
There you go. That's the scary one. Is your mic on?
Can everyone hear me? Okay, I'm trying to respect the people at the back a little bit, so. Well, we're just pleased to have Rick Stevens with us again this evening to offer this fourth and final presentation on dreams and spiritual formation. Just looking forward to a little bit of review of all that we've learned up to this point, and certainly an invitation at the end of the evening for any of you who would like to share a dream for us to reflect on together, to do that, because that's clearly part of the fun of being in one of Dr. Stevens' classes. I can tell that. So we want to enjoy that kind of engagement at the end of the evening this evening. And two, just for us to remind ourselves that as we dream, the wonderful spiritual question is God dreaming a dream through us? And Rick started us out in the first presentation by reminding us of all of the people through whom God has dreamed. And those are not just stories of the past. God, I trust, still works through dreams today and invites us to carry the dreams of the divine forward and make them real. So, thank you for deepening your insight and understanding into your dreams and the dream God may be dreaming through you. And now I will turn it over to Dr. Stevens.
Is my mic on? Yeah. Thanks, Julie. And welcome back, folks. Good to see you. Last week, Father Steve said it was so great to have something about symbols, and so I thought I'd just review a little about symbols. C.S. Lewis said symbols are a chunk of matter that take us from this material, tangible world through the symbol to the spiritual world, the godly or the goodly, if you will, where hopefully we would learn some love, mercy, and charity. And through the years, I've noted that symbols have problems. They can be lost. And that happens at least in part if we fail to tell our young people what they mean, to let them know. And if you haven't noticed in your experience, I have in mine, symbols can be hijacked or stolen and made to mean something else. So person with self-righteousness can lead a good symbol toward intolerance or arrogance. Literalism, that's only a couple of cross sticks, can destroy symbols, and people can steal the symbols and make them a pathway for their own power or controlling of other people. So we want to watch our symbols and hope we do it well. Have an example of what I think is a misdirected symbol. In Green Bay a couple of decades ago, we had what almost turned out to be a police incident at a Christian Family Association meeting. How can that turn? Well, it turns out a minister from Alabama was up in Green Bay to try to insist that Brown County put the 10 Commandments on the government's property, stepping over greatly the separation of church and state. And for the luncheon, Rabbi Sidney Weinberg attended. Seemed to be a good guy. He went to monthly meetings with Protestant and Catholic clergy. Sidney Weinberg, rabbi, taught a course in, believe it, New Testament. How would you read the New Testament from the perspective? Okay, so our head of the Christian Family Association, Minister Dean Young, verbally attacks the rabbi. And the press people there got scared. And what's going on is he thinks the symbol of the 10 Commandments is far greater than caring and compassion for other people. And if he had any brains, he'd realize the Jews have dealt with the 10 Commandments 2,000 years longer than the Protestants had. So, and from our transactional analysis, you realize inside that minister is some real hurt child. Maybe his anger coming out is like his parent tapes his father. Okay, and a scripture scholar said once, Jesus got angry in the scriptures only at self-righteous religious people. So, and a symbol, again, we'll get off of symbols, one of our favorites. And the question is, what does this great symbol mean? Most people would say freedom, and then you have to say freedom for what? For me, for my wealth, to get as much as I can, to be elite, or as Abe Lincoln, one of our greatest politicians, said, a flag stands for all women and men are created equal with inalienable rights, all of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What a fantastic see-through to higher values. And as President Roosevelt said, on the eve of America getting into World War II, that flag supports 4 rights, 4 freedoms for Americans, well depicted by Norman Rockwell. The speech was so important. Americans have the freedom of speech, of religion, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. So Roosevelt thought that is what our symbol depicted. If we just review our little bit on the transactional analysis, the inner child, the inner parent are not little dwarfs or people or elves inside. They're representing memories of what happened to us when we were a child. So that's significant. A wounded inner child grows up to be an adult that would fit very nicely in groupies or gangs. Definition of a gang is a family substitute, hurt child looking for some place. My wife's definition of a gang is a father substitute, lost or abusive father. One example of the inner child that I was so impressed with is what Mary was watching when I was talking to you last week, and that is an adult professional on international, what? I have to speak up? Oh, thank you. An adult professional appraiser on international television for the British Antiques Roadshow broke into tears. On international television, the story is wonderful. He's at his appraiser's booth and a woman comes up with a box to be appraised. She opens it and it's a bunch of hand puppets. And our fella starts tearing up. The background of the story is he was brought up in an orphanage, which he said wasn't too bad, but it was lonely. And the orphanage had a puppeteer come to entertain the kids. And the highlight of that part of his life, he said, is after the performance, the puppeteer sat next to him and showed him how to do the puppets and let him put his hand in a puppet. That little bit of goodness for a child can be huge. And so the appraiser, as an adult, in tears for that childhood, inner child experience, asks the lady, could I put my hand in one of the puppets? Very touching. Another story that could produce an inner child, either hurt or positive, is a good priest in our church told a story on himself in a homily. And the story was kind of confessional. He was sorry for this, but he was going down the church aisle before Mass, and here's this kid sitting in the church with his hat on. This church priest is a little rigid and rule-bound, and that, whoops, oh, thank God it's you. And so the priest scolds the child. Okay, I have a question why the priest didn't talk to the father next to the child. And an adult scolding a child is like a giant dumping fear on the child. So what will happen? We don't know. Did the priest do it gently? If he knelt down to be on the child's level, less a giant, that would be gently. And if you found out why the child had a hat and the priest apologized, that would be gently. This could be a good inner child memory. If the priest was angry, stood tall, looked down at the child, all that, and berated the child, we don't know because he didn't have it in his homily, then we got a wounded child we're building. The dad, after the priest scolded the child, in a congregation full of people, that's just a little embarrassing. That's hugely embarrassing. The father says to his son, why don't you tell father why you're wearing a hat? And the son says, I'm in cancer therapy. I have no hair. My head is cold and I'm embarrassed. So which way will the inner child go? The homily ended with accepting people, the priest said, might be more important than some of the rules. Okay, let's move on to some real dreams. I've got a number of them, most collected from classes like this, from people who either bring them up after the class, during the class, or who write them up and sent them in to me. So lots of dreams possible, and one dream particularly impressive to me, I entitled Woman in the Balcony, also entitled Woman with Two Elephants. Okay, here's her dream, her story. In her dream, she's in Spain, a new country for her, new life kind of thing. She and her husband are standing on a hotel balcony, details with wrought iron railing, flowers all around, and down below is a nice Spanish cobblestone street. Wow. Her feelings, she's in a good mood. She feels anticipation, what to discover in this dream tour. And she enjoys being in this totally new place. Sounds good. Story continues. She's then surprised and totally puzzled as two elephants come down the street from opposite directions right toward each other. And on the elephants riding them were her two daughters, one on each elephant. And the elephants ponderously keep moving, don't change anything, and collide. Crash. Then she sees from the balcony a young woman, one on the ground, not either of her daughters, and the woman is seriously hurt. She runs down the stairs, kneels by the gal, and realizes that this woman might be dying as a result of that collision. And the dreamer feels this woman really needs help. Some key phrases there, okay? Her feelings in the dream are very anxious, very worried, and she knows she should help this woman. Good so far? And while she kneels there, a church bell rings. She realizes it's Sunday. She puts on her white gloves and her white hat, leaves the injured girl, and walks alone to church. I'd say, wow. Okay, and feeling terribly guilty, but she's always taught it's a mortal sin to miss Mass. Pretty interesting. She awakens from her dream very disturbed. Adult woman, I think she's telling me this dream in her 60s. She's had it a number of times since she was 30 years old. Okay, so what have we got? Some fantastic symbols, ponderous elephants, a woman on the street, herself. I'd say her authority tapes, highly active. Everything the church authorities told her are embedded in that, and she's in tension between those churchy rules and her human compassion for a very badly injured person. Which of course brings to mind the Pharisees asking Jesus, telling him it's not within the rules to heal on the Sabbath, okay? And so church rules, I think, are a big part of this. She had her husband by her side. He's always been supportive of her in life. He's deceased, but he's in the dream. So this is a part of her, a more male part of her, maybe reflecting some of her husband's support and telling her some things are more important than some church rules. Ponderous elephants, immovable objects, unstoppable, maybe something institutional. You know, I've told people sometimes it takes me 20 years to change my mind on some terrible, difficult. Well, it takes the church almost 500 or 1,000 years to do any little change. Ponderous, unmovable, okay? So what she relates is she and herself are struggling between duty, which she was taught so strongly, following the rules, and her own sense of human compassion and her own conscience versus others' rules. So what do you think the dream is telling her? Maybe she needs to do some changes. Maybe she's an adult. She's past 30 by far. Maybe she should be making some of her own moral decisions. She said this was a major life-changing dream for her, learning to rely more on her adult conscience. Some church approaches build dependency, do it the way the clergy, and some help us mature to adult moral responsibility. Yeah? Good, yeah. What are the two daughters on the elephant and the woman on the ground? Thank you. The two daughters, she didn't say. So we're going to do our dream analysis, which is a bit of guesswork, because what you really have to do is ask the dreamer, and she's not here, right? But guessing the two daughters, quote unquote, on the elephants, maybe are two different parts of herself. You know, the one duty-bound, rule-locked, and the one thinking, I should go with my humanity. And the two combined into the dying woman at the bottom, again, part of herself. What is happening in her life that's killing her own spirit? Does that kind of fit? Thank you so much. I bring my wife because I say things and she says to people, what he really means is. And it comes out clearer. So I'd say this dream is informing her and enlightening her. A little bit of warning. She better do some serious choosing. And affirming her good will, good conscience. And Father Richard Rohr, a Franciscan, wrote that a major problem with Catholic moral theology is it's written for 14 to 24-year-old hormonal males. Does it go to moral use of wealth? Does it go to moral use of power? It's, never mind, okay. So that's our dream of the woman on the balcony. Julie stole my thunder, but I agree with her. Can dreams be from God, as someone asked last class? And lots of dreams have angels in them in the Bible, and angels are spirit guides, messengers from God, so sure. And our dreams have a spirit guide, a male oftentimes for women and a female oftentimes. How angelic, right? So possibly those are angels of God. Okay, another big dream. It was so luscious to teach this class and get these views from people. I call this the woman and the big hand. You can tell I'm not very ingenious at titles, and the dreamer should put them on. A woman about 60 years old is telling us, she wrote this out so you couldn't ask her, telling her about a recurrent dream. A number of times she gets this. The dream is she's a little girl somewhere between 3 and 10 years old, relaxing and comfortable on a green grassy field with blue sky, and the day is pleasant and delightful. Okay, just how comforting can a dream be? And she sees in the distance a group of adults. She has no fear, just peace. Then a big hand comes down from the sky, and she associates the hand with the hand of God. Pretty good. The hand starts dropping shredded paper all around, and the people, the adults, close in, start grabbing up the paper pieces. At first, as a little girl, she was curious and interested, but not afraid. And then the adults forming a child, adults begin fighting each other for the paper shreds, and the shreds that fall on her are painful. We have some things to figure out. What do the symbols mean? Okay, the people got more and more violent, the adults, and the girl more and more terrified. And there was bloody violence and chaos closing in around her. She looked up at the hand she thought was the hand of God, and it withdrew from her. Okay, sounds seriously interesting. Okay, and she would awake screaming and crying, run to her mother who would cuddle her and walk her around the house till she calmed down and could go back to sleep. This is a 60-year-old woman telling us this, so she's got some life experience. Okay, in symbols in here are the little girl, the shards of paper coming down, the big hand, what is that? And who are those adults? The adults who started out seeming peaceful and wind up threateningly scary to a little child. Okay, in real life, she wrote, her mom and dad fought a lot, she said. When she was young, there was physical abuse, her note said, not as bad as we have nowadays, she said. Her dad hit her mom, and during these fights, she, the 3 to 10-year-old, was scared and terrified and felt very ambiguous about God and marriage. Any surprises there? And ambiguous about God might link again with this God the Father. And what's her experience with the Father, right? Okay. And she felt she was not accepted by God the Father. That could be her own father back when those parent tapes, maybe he didn't care much for her. He certainly did not seem to care for his wife. In real life, she joined the convent for over 5 years and then left. She felt hurt and resentful that the convent didn't make her feel more accepted and less rejected. In those days, the convent was a pretty harsh place. Gal comes in, shave her head, give her a different name, give her no independent self, all dressed the same, and all listen to one person, Mother Superior. That's not a place for getting consolation. Back then, some of the convents much improved now. She spent 15 to 20 years after leaving the convent, not a believer in a loving God. Does that surprise anybody with her childhood, inner child hurts? Okay? She went around holding different jobs, finally has come back to the faith and believing in a caring God. This would be a great question to ask her. How, why, how did you do that? Where did that come from? Was there some good persons in her life? She sure needed some good, caring people in her life after her child. She still can't believe in a God who, as a father, could send his son specifically to suffer and die. That's a theology in many churches. God sent his only begotten son to die. Would any father or mother send their son to Afghanistan for the purpose of dying? Better theology, I think, is God sent his son to earth to show us how to live in caring, in kindness, in compassion. And that son greeted people of the wrong religion, of the wrong race, poor people, rich people, a diversity of people, amazing. Does that show us something more than, and isn't it a cruel image of God the Father? Would any father do that, you know? So that stuck with her. Could not believe in a God who would send his only son to die. In later life, she said, she still has this dream sometimes, but it has a different ending, which is delightful. In the middle of the terrifying adult violence, the hand came down and sent down a rope, and as she struggles to climb up the rope, upward is a symbol of, to a higher life, to a bigger understanding. As she climbs up the rope with determination to escape all that adult stuff, the hand comes down and helps her and pulls her away from harm. Whole different view of the hand of God. The hand of God abandoning her could very well be symbol for her parents and some of the abusive adults she knew. That's the hand that abandons her, okay? The little girl obviously is herself and shows us poignantly how if we don't treat little kids gently with care, we can really, not we, but people can really injure those children. I had a thing I did on campus, a woman coming from my class coming down the corridors. I'm one of the fastest moving things in the corridors. And she's got a little child with, which means either the daycare closed for the day or the child's sick or some, so we got this child down here among giants, all these adults rushing. And so I say hi to the mother and then kneel down and talk to the child at the child's level, hoping that just takes away some of that scariness of all the adults. Okay, one thing that'd be very interesting to know is what did her parents fight over? Was it money, and that's why the shards of paper or something? Be interesting to know when she left her family. We know a number of people, I think mostly girls, left at 16 or 18 from their families back when. Just had to get out. And did she find a good friend, a loving person, or a clergyman? And did she find a good friend, a loving person, or a clergyman that helped that change in her? Any questions on those thus far? Well, my wife never lets me get away with an explanation without asking. Sorry, Mary, she's here. Oh, well. Okay.
I will ask a question. Is there, I know that you'll provide a lot of sort of explanations, the different symbols and meanings. And you've said some of these are universal, but is there more than one symbols and meanings?
Jung said that symbols and dreams can be universal. We had an example last week, I forget what. Oh, the Indian student from India and the student from Mexico worried about a return flight ticket. Many of them can overlap cultures. A hand from the sky might be a good one for that, but the dreamer might interpret it differently in good Christian England than they would in Buddhist China or Japan, right? But the symbol would be there and have some. Are there different lists of these symbols? In some of the books, I think there are, but you got my list, which is picked up from some of these books, so yeah. And would there be difference? It always depends on the dreamer's life experience. We use the example of a dreamer having an underwater dream. And for some people, especially if they do scuba diving or snorkeling, that can be wonderful. For other people, underwater is absolutely frightening. So, same symbol, different dreamer. Is that close? Okay. Any others? Yes, please. Okay. Her question was what? Up closer, huh? Yeah, I thought I had it close. I think the question was, in some, is that better? Oh, grand. In some analyses, if you're on an animal riding to the west, it meant which? And another animal, right, which? Oh, one is to the future, one is to the past. Okay, is this possible in this dream? Well, they're both going toward each other and they don't get any place. That's an interesting use of that idea. Trying to get to the future and can't because it's totally blocked by something in the past. I like that kind of.
Was the dreamer hurt? Was it actually herself that was hurt?
Was the dreamer?
The young girl or the girl that was hurt, was
Yeah.
it actually the dreamer? Because all
Yes.
of that's coming together.
Was the young girl on the ground hurt the dreamer? That's the way we would look at it. And it would be fascinating to talk to that woman and ask her about the woman on the ground, okay? And you'd find things out about her past, some things that hurt her, scared her, and maybe her family had some rigidity in it. This is a rule, you got to do the rule. And the church comes in and says, never eat meat on Friday. It's a mortal sin. Any of you familiar with that one? It's gone. So, but it would be a big time rule in those days. So does her family come into it in terms of why is she so rule bound? Yeah, very good. Yeah. Anything else? Others? Bob projects well. Oh.
Is there any understanding in the profession that every dream means something or not?
Is there any understanding that every dream means something? First handout gives you a list, and some dreams apparently are just chaotic. It's been a busy day, I got a lot of energy, and it's all over the place. Jung said, not Jung, Freud said dreams are wish fulfillment. Is that a meaning, or is it just some of our emotions coming out? Example is, I wish I could bash the guy, but I don't because I'm going to get arrested. But in my dream, I do hit something. Wish fulfillment. I have a cartoon I may not have shown you, but Dagwood Bumstead has got a dream with all these lovely, very modest dancing girls. He wakes up and says, oh, damn. So he's wishing about something. Yeah, and then there's the Jungian dreams for some of the dreams. And some are the ones that seem to the dreamer very significant. I wake up and say, boy, I should follow that up. I wonder what that meant. Gee, holy smokes, that was something worth thinking about. That kind of dream is what we're talking about. Others could be mishmash.
I visualize somebody laying in bed sleeping with 100 monitors on their head. Can dreams, do they leave a trace for the electronic tracking thing?
Dreams, do they show up on the electronic stuff? Yes. No, not the particular dream, not the details, but the fact that the dreamer's got some dream going on inside. So I think we said a week or so ago, our dreams, our sleep goes in cycles, really deep sleep, shallower sleep, not awake, shallower sleep, deep sleep, 4 or 5 times a night. Unless you get up to the bathroom and then it's, never mind. Okay, so in these upper portions where the brain waves change, they become more lively. And if you watch the person sleeping, their eyes are doing things. And that's called rapid eye movement. And so they defined that as REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And it goes with the more rapid active brain waves with the electrodes. Wake a person up during that and they can tell you their dream. They were dreaming. Deep sleep, as we said before, wake a person up and they don't know if they're in the US or Alaska or where. They're so out of it. Yeah.
To Julie's question, isn't it the case that Freud had a whole different idea of what the different symbols should mean than Jung did, and that was part of the reason they split?
Yes.
Because Freud's ideas, they almost always were sexual.
Yeah.
And he couldn't seem to see any other meanings in them, and Freud
Right.
and Jung
The question is, didn't one of the things between Freud and Jung differences were they interpreted those symbols differently? And an awful lot of Freudian interpretation was sexual or aggression or something. The deep inner emotions within us that are very biological. And Jung expanded that to more psychological and allowing that the person has mental states that don't all relate to biological brain functions. And so the lock and key example, that down the stairs to the big door with the big lock, and the one that Jung would not tell Freud. Because Jung had the big key in the dream, and Freud would give it a rather lewd interpretation. And Jung said, no, check the emotions of the dreamer. They weren't sexual at all. They were excitement, interest, drawing you, a curiosity. And so they departed big time over interpretations of symbols. These are great questions, yes.
So we had said that oftentimes the people in our dreams and the things in our dreams are extensions of ourselves. Are there ever times when a person in a dream is actually that person?
Oftentimes a person in a dream we interpret as the dreamer or part of the dreamer. Are there times when that person in the dream is really someone else, kind of like for real in the real world? I think, yeah. And that's one of the difficulties of distinguishing. Is this really someone I had an interaction with for a while, and my dream is getting me straightened out on that interaction of a real person? Or is that person got a bunch of characteristics like stubbornness and willfulness, and in the dream that person represents stubbornness and willfulness in whom? And that could be in the dreamer. Good, hey, wow. Okay, let us move on. Okay, here's a dream I had back when. I think probably when I was getting out of graduate school. And what happens in the sciences is you really have to decide whether you want to be a researcher or a teaching professor. That's a huge choice. And even if you're a teaching professor such as Stevens Point or UWGB, you got to do some research, but it's not this super high power day in, day out research, because you're doing so much teaching and you got to read so much to be a good teacher. In Madison, we've got professors there, some only teach one course a year. The bigger ones teach one course a semester. We taught 7 courses a year, I think it was, 8 here at Stevens Point. So, and the goal at Madison is to get grants. So UW-Madison was one of the biggest grant collectors of universities in the country, top 3 to 5th in the 70s with all the budget cuts and people scary about coming to UW. Not sure where that is now. So, okay, so here's the dream of a guy, me, in graduate school looking at getting a job. Where do I go? The dream says I was going down the corridor to my lab, and I got to the door to my lab and it was locked. I couldn't get in. So I wandered down the corridor, across campus, and somehow wound up at the top of a large lecture hall, of which I am very familiar. Okay, at the top of a large lecture hall where I met a group of students. Whoop. What do I push here? What do it? Well, this is not turning. Excuse me a bit. Huh. Well, I met a group of students at the top of this large lecture hall, 2 stories down, rows of chairs down to a table at the bottom where the professor stands. And we got talking. And I'm leaning against the wall talking to all these students, and we're having a ball. All sorts of great ideas. Yeah, neither the arrows nor my remote works. And they thought I had interesting ideas. So I'm looking down at the blackboard. Thank you. A hand from above. I'm looking down at the blackboard, and what I see is not the back of the building, but the big open sky. I picture this at Seattle Pacific University, where I gave some talks, and the sky was like that around campus. And I thought, wow. And the thought for me as the dreamer was, in teaching, you're about the whole world. It's wide open. You don't if you're just a technical trainer professor, I do all the little tidbit details for my field and don't. If you had some history of science, if you had some philosophy of science, not at the loss of good science teaching, but at expanding students' minds, it opens up a whole world like that. So I was thrilled. Walked down to the front of the classroom and said, wow, I'm trying to make a decision, lab or teaching. Okay. We had a gal who interviewed with us, and we have a heavy teaching load. And she was so gung-ho teaching, and we made an offer. She turned us down for a job in a laboratory with no teaching at all. It is a distinction. So after getting down on the teaching at the bottom of the lecture hall, a bus came through I got to ride on, and it took me through places I had been. Universities, Seattle Pacific, we drove through that. UW-Madison, we drove through that. Oxford University, where I've given some talks. U of Rochester, U of Illinois, all these universities, and it just was great. So I'm thinking this is an affirming dream. I think it's saying that the dreamer could teach anywhere and do a good job. Research, but teaching could hold his own on any of that. Okay, another dream. Aren't these interesting? Are they? And again, this is getting into the inner psyche and sometimes the soul of a person. What is they working on? What are they struggling with? What are they aiming for? You know, if you sat them down and said, what are you aiming for? They'd say, I don't know. But if you get a dream, you get a lot of that. Okay, this dream is entitled Leaving the Hometown. And the dreamer is a male in his 50s, and he had a dream like this almost every time he went back to his kids' home to visit mom and dad. Had a dream like this in different forms, but essence the same. So the dream is he's walking down a street in his hometown, in the downtown section, and like he did many times as a kid, and he's looking at a large old stone building, which he can identify in the dream. He said, that's the old bank where I used to go sometimes with my mom, but sometimes with my grandmother. And a young man appears and offers to be a tour guide to him through the city and he grew up in. So he walks him down the street and turns right onto the main street of his hometown. And the young man is pointing out these buildings and that buildings, and the dreamer is saying, I don't know why I'm doing this. I know all that. I've been here. Okay? The dreamer is feeling pretty comfortable and a little uninterested. You know, I could be blowing bubbles somewhere. This is not quite interesting to me. Then they walk past two old buildings that the guide was kind of a college-age student and showed him these buildings. And the dreamer had a fascinating sense, something significant here. This is different, okay? And one of the buildings was an old Rococo building, all sorts of gargoyles, you know, corners rounded edges where a straight corner ought to be. And it's just a nifty, old, interesting building, which captured his interest. And then they went by another building, quite different, block stone, sort of an impenetrable barrier type building, oak door. You couldn't get the sense in the dream, you couldn't get this building. And the two buildings are right together. You know how they build buildings together like that? And they're right together. Okay, dreamer doesn't know what to make of this, just some other buildings in his hometown. And the young guide walks him westward. The main street in his town goes east-west, walks him westward to where the main street crosses the river that runs through town. And the river's really there. The dreamer's amazed, in part because when the dreamer was a kid, the river was there, Main Street went over it, but it was all boarded up in real life as a kid. And he had to see the river look through cracks. And in the dream, it's wide open. Big, amazing view down the river. And dreamer was amazed, fascinated with the clear view was a word he used. Could be significant in what the dreamer's experiencing. And in the middle of the river is a flat rock. Bob will tell you what kind, shale or something, some limestone in the middle. The guide and the dreamer says he stops and looks from Main Street north along the flowing river and sees two animals on the little island. And he could not identify the animals. He knew one was a sea turtle for sure, and the other he described as a furry kitten sitting on its haunches. It took him a year before he said, oh, he ran into a picture in a book magazine. That's a meerkat. Okay, I don't think God came down and planted meerkat in his, he probably saw it somewhere before and totally forgot. Okay, but on this island, there is a sea turtle and a meerkat. His interest is aroused, and the meerkat looks right at him. He's up on the bridge, meerkat looking right at him. And there's this sense of, wants to tell me something, says our dreamer. What is he trying to say? And the sea turtle is upside down on its back, trapped. You know, that's not good, okay? So the dreamer in the dream realizes the sea turtle is out of its element, out of place, handicapped, just not able to live its life. Sea turtle was not where it belonged. And as the dreamer thought about this, a little concerned, the meerkat walks over, struggles, and flips over the sea turtle. The sea turtle scurries into the river, which flows northward. The dreamer says, this is going to go up to the Great Lakes, and it's going to go to the Atlantic Ocean. And the sea turtle is free, has been freed to enter the environment where it belongs. And he didn't get this idea till maybe a year later about his own dream. The meerkat is not in its environment where it belongs. It doesn't belong in a river, it belongs in a desert. So we got two major creatures saying, you're where you don't belong. He's in his hometown, exploring where he was as a child, and this is his dream. Then the furry animal, as he described it, we're saying meerkat, looked up at him and was trying to tell him something. So he's having to figure this out. The young guide stood there and looked at him, and the dreamer turned westward, is that the right direction? And started walking westward, which is from his hometown toward where he lived in Wisconsin, and where his family is, and all that is him as an adult, out that way. And his whole feeling is, I'm going to where I belong. Okay, interesting symbols we could work on: buildings, people, bridge, flowing river, islands. He didn't have an idea why the bank was interesting. A year or two later, he figured out that was where he waited at a bus stop to go to his home as a kid. And the dreamer guide walks him in the opposite direction, okay? The buildings, he had no idea what that Rococo building and that block impenetrable building was about. And he discussed this dream with a good clergyman. And the clergyman said to him, what if those represent people? Buildings representing people. And his brain went, wow, yes! That's my mom and dad. That's my mom and dad. Dad more colorful, mom far more rigid, colder. Dad a little more softer, he said. So here are his mom and dad authority tapes coming out in the image. The symbol is the guide in there, part of his own self. Okay? And what are the animals telling him? You got to get in your own element. You're out of your element when you're back to your kiddie home. Okay? And he wasn't very much respected by his mom or parents when he was an adult. So emotionally, the dream is he's leaving his childhood back there. Okay? He said he would spend 2 or 3 weeks depressed after every visit to his hometown because the way he got treated more like a kid and whatnot. So I would say, what would you say the dream is about? What type of dream is this from our list? Informative dream, yeah. What? Corrective dream, yeah. What's it correcting him about? Look forward rather than looking back. Yep. Does it tell him never go home to visit your folks? That would be a temptation, but maybe not. Maybe have a different attitude when dealing with them or something. I'm not sure quite what that would be, but work something different. There was something in the letter to Carolyn Hacks, the advice columnist, is very good. And there's some gal in there saying, I don't go home anymore. I can't handle it, you know.
Is the turtle a symbol of wisdom or sort of endurance?
Is the turtle?
Yeah, I just
Is the
was
turtle a symbol of wisdom? My guess is no, but the meerkat is, who looks right at you and gives you the sense, I'm trying to tell you something important. Don't take your eyes away from me. The turtle is a symbol of how incapacitating a glorious creature, beautiful and helpless, can be so incapacitated and made helpless. Yeah, but so beautiful in its own environment. Yeah, please.
The meerkat looking straight at the dreamer seems to me to be saying, pay attention, this is about you. It's not about a turtle. This is about you.
Very interesting. She said that the meerkat looking straight at the dreamer is saying, pay attention, this is about you. Not about furry animals, not about turtles, not about buildings, about you. Give it some thought, maybe, huh? Thank you. Yeah. This is nice. Yeah.
Meerkat was actually looking at his soul and saying, going to the essence, looking straight in beyond what he was seeing externally, but going into the person's soul and saying,
Okay.
see something there.
She says she thought maybe that penetrating view of the meerkat into the eyes of the dreamer was penetrating into his soul, certainly into his psyche, and saying, what have you got in there? What should you adjust in there? Oh, what should the dreamer affirm that's in there? Because obviously his parents are not affirming it, and he's going to have to affirm his talents and gifts himself. Maybe, huh? You guys are good. This is great. Yeah, I had that the dream is informing, correcting about interrelationships in his parental family, and affirming him. Go west, young man. Well, it wasn't quite that, but affirming that that's where your home is, not here. Okay, whoops.
Just leave that with you, sir.
Going west could also be your life is going to be ending at some point, and there's some things you need to do before that ends. Could that also be what that symbol of going west would be?
She's got a question that does going west mean your life is going to end someday and you ought to adjust some things before you get there? My creaky old aging self worries about that question. I don't know. Oh, that's why you asked the dreamer. That's why you asked the dreamer. That would be a great question. Two people with together, the dreamer and a person with good questions, and what did it mean? Yeah, very good. Those are the right questions. Those are the right ones. Yes, please.
The first thing I saw was the word freedom, and it's like go back and do what you're doing in your life. You know, you come home for short visits, but then keep going and, you know, hopefully doing all the great things you are in your life.
Yeah. Well, it suggests to me you can come home for visits, but your person is no longer there. It would be there if his mom and dad said, "What are you doing? Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about it. I'm impressed." A dad who would say, or mom, that, "Boy, am I proud of you." And I'm not sure this dreamer got that. So had to do some of his own self-affirming, I think. And that is doing something different than back in my hometown. Okay? Okay, we're doing fantastic. Okay, here's a good one for you. Okay, those are some of the symbols in the dream we could work on some other time a little bit more. Next dream is, what did I call it? I call it the giant hunt. And some of us might relate to this. Okay, the dreamer says he's walking through the woods near a lake on property owned by his job, the people who employ him. He's walked this trail many times during lunchtime in reality. But this time he's searching for a frightening giant, maybe 20 feet tall. He says a superhuman creature was in these woods, known to be stalking. The dreamer is carrying awkward, heavy tools on his back, dragging them through the woods, tools supposedly to catch a giant. But the tools are really slowing him down. He comes in the woods to an opening with a cabin in it. And he hasn't seen any signs of the giant, so he enters the cabin, which from the inside seems to be a kind of greenhouse with potting tables in it. Dreams get a little strange. Potting tables in it, and under one potting table is a giant's footprint. In the dream, he's saying, how can that be? The giant's way up here. How did they get a footprint on? There's some clue in there triggering his wonderment. But the dreamer is still anxious and fearful. He leaves the greenhouse. There's a grassy area between him and a lake. And down on the dock, there is a 12 or 14-foot fishing boat, open boat, he said, tied to the right side of the dock. And there he meets a friendly woman. She's dressed in a safari suit, very neat. Safari suit, sort of like a park ranger suit, she seems very competent. She welcomes him, helps him into the boat, and has said she'll make this easier for him, finding the giant. She organizes his equipment for catching giants and assures him we'll get the job done. Okay, well, obviously a competent helper. She very easily takes the boat out about 50 yards from shore, where there is the top of a building sticking out of the water. He said something like a longish cupola, just something about this tall and some windows in it. Longish cupola. and it's the top of a submerged building. She helps him climb out of the boat. They climb up the roof of the building, and she helps him climb through a window. She's leading all the way. In through the window, he sees he's like in a huge barn, he said, and most of it's underwater. But it's totally dry in there. And he's coming in the upper stories with his guide. With her presence, he feels more relaxed, though he's still afraid that the giant may come into that building and he'd be trapped. So big, scary sense of something large. And then he, quote, knows the giant is coming through a big, large barn-like opening in the building, which is underwater, and he doesn't know why the water is not pouring in. That's like our bathtub dream but the water is out there, and he knows the giant comes from inside underwater. The giant comes through the door, he's apprehensive, and to his great surprise, what comes through the door is a dwarf-like, ordinary, bald man, half his height, in a circus-like costume, and the little dwarf is angry and resentful, but not threatening, and in fact, he's pretty comic. This is the big, fearful creature he was worried about. And the dwarf seems pretty incompetent. The dreamer is hugely relieved. He wonders how he could have been so fearful of such an incompetent, his words, inept, comical, wimpy character. He named the character Wormwood. Obviously, the dreamer is getting a little bit of, Wormwood is the name that C.S. Lewis used for a devil in one of his books, Screwtape Letters, thank you. Now the dreamer is at ease. He's got this little shrimp here who's griping away. He is helped and led by our safari-garbed woman back up the side of the inside of the barn, back through the upper windows, back into the boat, and they return to shore. He wonders why he was so anxious of the giant, and he is now relaxed and relieved. What do you think? How about some symbols? Yes? Ooh.
The water.
The water?
My thought was that it's something that he's worried about, his inner self is trying to tell him it's not that big of a deal, maybe. That's something that is seeming overwhelming to him right now, but it's
okay. The water is the part of the inner self, and it's trying to tell him that the worries he had inside himself were so blown up, and it really wasn't supposed to be that big a deal. And his maybe inner self is making it huger than it ever should be. Yeah, other things? Before he gets into the water, lugging heavy tools, slowing his life down. So maybe he's got inside him some of these angry feelings that the little dwarf talked about, and it's slowing his life down and impeding him. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, things he thinks he needs.
What?
Things that he thinks he needs.
Things he thinks he needs.
But it also occurred to me it might not be any one thing that he's worrying about, that he's made too much out of. It might be that this is a normal pattern, that he tends to make mountains out of molehills all the time, sees fearful things where they aren't really fearful, but he sees them as fearful.
And
It's
she
a common
says
thing.
maybe he's not worried about one thing, but the giant and the fear represents many things in his life, or more possibly represents his own emotional attitude to life. He takes in everything in a fearful manner, thinks it's gonna be a big problem, when oftentimes it's wimpy. Okay? Okay. Whoops, was there another? Good one, sure. What's the ranger guide? Very competent, very welcoming, a guide, a leader, reassures him. Well, that's the inner spirit in a woman form. For males, that would be called the anima. Our guide for the woman with the semi-truck was a male for her, the animus. Similar kind of figure, goes across cultures and people. The male in the semi-truck teaching her how to do it, showing her how to do it, and saying, you can do this. The woman in the barn under the water saying, you need not fear this. You're over-exaggerating, and really you should look at life as more wimpy problems. The old saying is, never sweat the small problems, ... all the problems are small problems.
Is it relevant that he's on the campus of his employer?
Is it relevant that he's on the land of his own employer? I left a part out because I wanted to broaden our discussion, but he's mad at his job for not treating him fairly. That's what the little dwarf is mad about. Good insights. Oh, wow.
Could, in terms of part of himself being different parts in there, could there be a part of him that was the giant and a part of him that was the dwarf?
Part of the creatures are part of himself. Could one part of him be the fearful giant? Could one part be the dwarf? Yeah, but my thinking at present, we could talk, that would develop it. But my thinking is the giant is part of himself in terms of his emotional negative reactions, that part of himself. Maybe it's an injured inner child. When he was a kid, things were big and he was not treated too well. And so that's the part of him that comes to the fore more frequently. And what the dream is informative about is, yeah, all that you think your emotions are so big are really little emotions if you realize it or manage them well. I don't know, something like that. This is great. Okay, we have time for 5 more. Only have 1 here. Let's see what else we have. Okay. This dream is called A Woman at Sunset. And the woman who submitted this was in her late 40s. And she wrote, I was in a marshy area on the edge of a larger body of water. It was evening and the sun was setting. A beautiful sunset was forming. It was autumn. All kinds of waterfowl were gathering about to migrate. They were swimming in the marshy ponds and flying about. It was beautiful and fascinating. Okay. She left, the dreamer, I left the marshy area and began to climb upwards, onto a grassy path that led into a woods above the marsh. Midway along the path, I came upon a striking clump of grass that was blooming with small, bright blue, star-shaped flowers. Is this a worrisome dream like the last one? Bright blue, star-shaped flowers. The grass and blue flowers were so vivid and alive. I thought of St. Mary and that kind of blue. Oh, is she behind me? She's not in blue? Okay. And she thought of it as the morning star. She stopped to notice the flowers, thought of picking them, what don't we all? But decided to leave them there so they would not die. Got some key words like die, fall, sun setting in here. She goes on into the woods at the top of the hill, and the path met another path, which I turned onto and walked down this path and then left it to explore a grassy clearing. The sun was warm, and it was now mid-afternoon, not evening. Something refreshed there. She lay down to take a peaceful, warm nap. In real life, autumn is her favorite season, even when she was a kid. Her feelings about the dream was she was captivated, felt very peaceful, very at ease. She was in her 40s where life was changing, kids out of the house, and I don't know about her, but in my case, you start wondering about this life isn't going to last forever. Who is ever going west into the sunset? So it seems like, what does the autumn and sunset stuff suggest to you? End of life. End of life, getting there. Yeah, like someone suggested, are you getting closer to that? I would think maybe so. Very nice, yeah. Anything else?
I'm wondering if it means the end of life of one part, because when she went back, it was in the middle of the afternoon, and it was a different terrain with a different idea. Menopause for women is a change. I mean, it's not just a physical change, but it's a change in outlook, and new dreams are born in menopause that go on. And I'm wondering if that was what was being revealed to her.
I'm wondering if we're in trouble doing this in a church. No, sorry. That's my, okay, midlife, physical changes in a woman that men don't have. A statement about entering a different part of life. That's fascinating. I like that a lot. That you would have fun talking to the dreamer about, okay? And is it a new beginning rather than an ending? Mm-hmm. That's why we go back a bit, Beginning of the dream, it's ending. As you suggest, maybe what's ending is the child rearing, childbearing, this whole part of life, and then that's gone, and we're starting again. So sunset of one part of life and beginning of another. Very nice, yeah. And birds are migrating, so life is moving on. Thank you. That's a neat. I will put this in my notes. Somebody else?
Anyone else?
She said something about blue is her favorite color, and where am I? Maybe the sun is a symbol of enlightenment, which it is in many cultures. Her feelings are observing, which isn't doing anything. It's just, oh, wow, look at these fascinating people in here. This is interesting. And just being. I think Carl Jung says a problem with Americans is they're always humans doing and not humans being. In her dream, she was a human being, taking it in, taking it easy, and it was uplifting to be alive. And the sun was no longer setting. Wow, pretty neat. Okay, how would you rate this dream in terms of what category of dream? Type of dream? Affirming dream, yeah, you agree? Okay. I was tempted to say, any others? I'm sorry. Tempted to say informing, but I don't think that's the best word. I think the word is illuminating. And for that matter, that's what the sunlight does in the dream, illuminates that new part of life you're talking about. That is very nice. Her life is going well. She's appreciating it herself. And she earns a guiltless rest. I like that, huh? Oops. Surprise, surprise, the professor will end on time. And so, as Julie suggests, why don't you do this part, Julie?
I just have a question.
Oh, thank you.
I just have a question. Can you comment on self-initiated dreams?
Can I comment on self-initiating dreams? Do you mean while asleep in bed or during the day?
No, as you're getting ready to retire.
To retire.
Right.
Retiring from a job or retiring for the day?
For the day.
Okay, for the day. Can you initiate a dream?
What? Yes. I mean, is it possible? Okay. I mean, I think it is. Okay, depending upon what state of mind you happen to be in. But have you encountered individuals, okay, that come in with dreams that they indicate that they've been able to initiate on their own?
Okay, have I encountered people who have dreams that they were able to start up by themselves? By, I presume, getting in bed and thinking, I'm going to dream of this. I have not, but I can see how it can happen. I've had a busy day. I've been working on dream classes. I get in bed and ideas start to roll. Is that a dream? Well, it's close. And sometimes, not quite fully awake. And similar is they do talk about a waking dream where you find a place nice and quiet, maybe especially if you write down things that you have been going through in your life recently, positive or negative, or if you start examining your notes on a dream you had before. All those things, if you settle quietly, will allow your imagination to start rolling. You're not necessarily asleep, but it's very much like a dream, especially if you get involved in it. I was at a mass in Door County, and I don't know how this happened, but we're just quietly sitting there, and a dream of an eagle soaring came to mind, and the eagle was soaring over all this territory. And I'm thinking, what a grand view this is. I was not asleep, but man, that came. And then I thought, this is what teaching is sometimes like. When you can really get a class going, you've got not detailed, fact-lit information, but questions to open students' minds with. That is a great experience. I was not asleep for that. I think I wrote it down somewhere. That was very nice, yeah. So yes, I think you can. I think you can. Okay, great. Other questions?
We have
Yeah,
time for
Bob.
one last question.
So if you could divide people into two categories, one group, everything is going great in their life, they're happy. The other group has all kinds of problems in their life. They're,
Did you say
no,
dividing?
which group dreams more? Are there, are these people that have all these problems? Are they trying to subconsciously solve
You got to
their
get,
problems?
okay, his question is, who dreams more? People with loads of problems in their life or people whose life is going very nicely? I don't know. You should get together with one of the sociology profs here on campus and do a survey. You'd have to ask a lot of people. But if you want me to guess, only a guess, I have a suspicion people who have hard things going on in life may be dreaming more. It's grinding around in there. They can't quite turn it off. And if they're fortunate, whatever the dream puts together gives a little insight into, I should not be worrying about giants. My problems are a lot smaller. I have to work on that. That would be, right? Yeah, you think so? Oh, okay. Have any dreams about not hitting your fingers when you're grinding stones? Julie?
Well, just to say, we could add to that study, do happier or more troubled people pray more?
Oh.
We could see how that goes.
Yeah, yeah. And if they're wise and they can settle, troubled people will look for help.
Yes,
Will look for help.
yes.
And that, yep.
Well, I just want to say that you have been a great help to us
thank
throughout
you.
this season of Lent. I hope everyone has enjoyed deepening an understanding of your own psyche and soul with Dr. Stevens' illuminations.
Oh, wow,
So,
thank you.
Let's just thank him again for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. And here all along, I thought they brought me in for penance for Lent. Thank you very much.